Scott tells us about the story of Charles Bergen. Quote, "So, the cooperatives of America were struggling along, trying to gain more ground with the population. And one of the huge barriers we kept running up against was the club idea. People were very skeptical and wary of everyone having the responsibility of making their own personal paraphernalia. This idea was constantly attacked and questioned from all sides. Then Charles comes along. He was an older, retired gentleman who loved to fish. He'd been fishing all his life. Apparently, he'd read Strickland's book and began viewing our website. And being a fisherman, he wondered about this whole club thing. In particular, he questioned the idea of having to make his own rods and reels. So he started to research what kinds of tools and equipment it would require to build fishing poles from scratch and fashion lures and hooks and make his own lines. The internet had a wealth of information for him. It had how-to videos on practically everything you could think of. He watched and read everything he could on building fishing rods and reels, and then purchased the tools and the materials he thought he would need to get started. He set up a workplace in the old barn he had on his property." End quote. We now quote from an interview of Charles Bergen that was published in one of the popular fishing journals at the time. Quote, "I just wanted to know how realistic it all was, how difficult and time-consuming it would be for someone who knew nothing about making a fishing pole to actually make one, a good one, if given the material, the tools, and the proper instructions. So I went online and was amazed at the amount of information that was out there for free. I found people were already making their own things and making videos to show others how to do it as well. It was incredibly enlightening to me. For the younger generations, this easy access to information and instruction on any topic imaginable was more commonplace, more like, yeah, so what? But for me, this gave a great deal more credence to this whole club concept of cooperatism. Even in a money system where people can just go buy things, there are plenty of individuals choosing to make their own, and successfully. I'm sure they all had their own reasons to save money or to customize something in a unique way, or most commonly for fun. But the point is, they were doing it. People were forging, cutting, and shaping metals. They were producing and working with plastics and making molds. They were skilled in all kinds of woodworking techniques. They were working with clays, fiberglass, graphite, stone, bamboo, silicone, and all manner of building materials. The information and instructional videos were endless. So I made the commitment and set up a little shop in the barn. It cost me a bit initially, but this was something I really had to try. Heck, I was retired and had the time and interest. At first, it took a great deal of trial and error and experimentation, but eventually I was able to construct my first pole. The hardest part was the reel. To make a really nice one took a considerable amount of work. I don't even want to tell you how many I trashed. For me, it was a rather complex little mechanism. I had to study up and learn how a good, versatile one worked and how they were made. Once I understood the mechanics, the thought of actually making one from scratch seemed quite ambitious. Working with the metal and using the router was not easy, and getting the precision I wanted took a great deal of patience. But I finally did it. I made my first high-performance reel. Armed with my newfound success, I became more proficient. Once I'd successfully made a rack of very respectable poles, revising and documenting the process, I invited friends and relatives to try their hand at it under my direction and supervision. It was, for the most part, successful. I can't say it went off without a hitch. There were plenty of problems and redos, but everyone eventually walked away with a respectable pole. I had set up different stations where each step of the process could be completed. They just followed the instructions and asked me questions, which many times gave me more insight into improving the process. I would demonstrate some of the more difficult procedures, but they actually ended up producing their very own handmade fishing pole. I continued to refine the process and experiment with different customizing features. I kept soliciting new guinea pigs, friends of friends, and then strangers to try out my process and see how successful they were. It eventually became quite streamlined. I was confident that almost anyone could come to my shop and construct their own custom fishing rod and reel. Then I opened it up to the general public. People had to pay for the materials involved, plus a fee to cover my overhead, such as my electric bill, etc. But I wasn't in it to make a profit, at least not at first. They were basically getting a fishing pole at cost. It became so popular, I started charging a modest fee over my costs, turning it into a little business for me. People, of course, could just go buy a similar pole for the price I was charging them to make their own. Large manufacturers could buy materials wholesale in bulk, and automation cut their labor costs. But the point is, people still came to do it. They wanted to do it. They chose it over simply buying one at the store. Why? It was fun. It was more satisfying. A pole they actually made themselves meant more to them. And I imagine this would be true of almost anything. I'm sure there are still plenty of people who would rather simply go buy one, but if you take away all the cost, making the entire venture free, and the process laid out and staged properly for maximum efficiency, ease, and fun, then I'm thinking few people would not want to participate in making their own whatever. And as far as I can see, that is what would occur in these club situations in a cooperativist environment. They would be laid out like my barn, only on a larger scale, more efficient, more organized, more working space, better tools, and with a host of experienced enthusiasts helping each other and helping others and sharing their knowledge. And remember, it's not like a factory nowadays that has to mass produce thousands of identical poles in short periods of time. No, it's not about how many you can duplicate within a certain time frame in order to mass sell them to the general public. It's about taking your time and enjoying going through an individual process to end up with an individual pole. It's about the satisfaction. It's about really owning that pole from the ground up. And when you're out using that pole, it's about knowing that. It's about when something maybe malfunctions or breaks on that pole or reel, not simply trashing it and buying a whole new one, but knowing how to fix or replace the part, keeping your pole in tip-top condition. It's about the durability and conservation of things. It's not about this use it till it breaks, then throw away and buy another one mentality. In fact, people were always coming back and repairing and recustomizing parts of their existing poles, sometimes getting very innovative. I can safely say I learned a thing or two from many of these people and kept augmenting my system and incorporating these new procedures and techniques as options in the process. Many people offered to help and volunteered their time at my barn. People helped me fine-tune procedures and techniques. The process kept evolving and expanding, always allowing for more and more variations and options for varying types of designs. Some of these people helped me put together catalogs with photos and procedures, and even some stop-action videos you could play to walk you through various techniques at the various stages. Yeah, it became quite an operation. And now I'd like to comment on mass production. In a money system, mass production is very important. It ensures that there is always enough supply on hand to meet the demand. That's how money is made in a modern industrial society. It encourages consumers to get, creating a lot of waste. Everyone has to have a car or two or three. If everyone didn't have to have their own car, there would be less frustrating traffic jams, less traffic fatalities, less pollution. But a money-based system encourages people to overindulge. Advertising does this. Manufacturers love this. Sales reps crave this. And economies thrive and survive, live or die on this. Whereas in a cooperativist environment, people are making what they need and making it to last. And in general, I'd say, not overindulging. Oh, sure, there will always be those who do, but it won't be encouraged anymore. It won't be the norm anymore. They won't be able on a whim to just go buy 20 fishing poles. That's not to say someone couldn't have 20 fishing poles if they chose to, but it wouldn't be a question of someone doing it just because they have the money to spend, allowing them to brag that they are wealthy enough that they can own 20 fishing poles that they'll never use, or cars or whatever, just because they can. You know what I mean? Money allows people to be far more frivolous and wasteful. They can and do easily adopt the attitude that I won't have to deal with the mess or the details or the upkeep. I'll just pay someone else to do it. Now let me tell you something very destructive about the money system. Insurance. That's what eventually shut me down. Insurance. Insurance and fear of lawsuits. I was told, well, what if somebody gets hurt? You're liable, and they could take everything you have. You need all kinds of insurance to cover yourself. The way I see it, it's time people started taking responsibility for their own actions. If I choose to do something and end up getting hurt, I can't go looking to make someone else liable just because I was on their property or was using their tool. We have choices in life. We make them and we live with them. Sometimes things happen that shouldn't. And sometimes things happen that are a darn shame for those involved. And most times, that warrants a great deal of sadness and sympathy. But to create this monster called insurance is causing far more problems than it solves. And this monster can only be useful in a money system because it's all about the money, isn't it? Ultimately, some people will say it's about the victim. But insurance can't undo what's done to that person. Why should someone else have to pay for that person's choice or mistake? Unless, of course, there was some sort of malicious intent involved or a genuine fault. But then you're looking at some sort of criminal prosecution as opposed to some sort of cash settlement. These are two entirely different things. In a cooperative system, we don't have to find someone to blame, someone who must pay for our choice or misfortune. The victim already has his guaranteed standard of living, as everyone does. He or she doesn't have to worry about his food or home or bills. There is a medical community available who wants to be involved in his medical needs and recovery. And this medical community has no financial concerns or bills to pay either, and therefore has no need of payment from the victim. There is no need for insurance to exist. But in a money system, it thrives, putting restrictions and restraints on people and endeavors. It punishes people for not being scrupulous and overcautious when opening up an opportunity to the public. Or, in many matters, even when the general public is not involved, where private property is concerned. This is a shame, because it lessens an individual's sense of taking full responsibility for his or her actions in life and puts barriers and fear in the way of innovating opportunities for those with wonderful ideas. Insurance companies and lawyers have taken us down a path of blame and accusation, and they are getting rich off of it. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Now, as far as this cooperative thing goes, some people will try to twist things around and discredit my fishing pole experiment as being hypocritical because I was making money at it. Well, that's true. I was making some money at it, but remember, we're still in a money system. I still had to buy the materials, try to recoup my equipment costs, pay the utility bills, and like everybody else, I still had and have personal living expenses, etc. But if you ask me, if we were in a cooperative system and I wasn't making money at it, would I still do it? The answer to that question is absolutely yes. I would have no living expenses. I wouldn't need the money. And I love this sport. I'd be one of those guys hanging out at the local fishing club, talking fishing, maybe making a new custom pole every so often, and having a blast helping others make their own. Yeah, I could see this whole thing working very well. And not just for fishing, but anything people had a passion for. In a system like that, I wouldn't wonder that I might try my hand at a number of other things as well, just because I'd have the freedom, opportunity, and access to the resources necessary to try them, like golf or skating or painting. I might start out hanging at one of the clubs for golfers and try my hand at making my own set of clubs, taking them out on the course and giving them a try. Yeah, I'm thinking it might be pretty great. If I didn't end up liking it, I wouldn't have to worry about my investment. It didn't cost me anything except time. I'd just donate the clubs back to the club for someone else to use. Yeah, I could really see it working. End quote.